Good morning on this Easter Monday. Well, I took some time to do the most important thing, which is to do spiritual exercises. And one of the things is to provide the notes that I made for the third chapter of the book called The Devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, How to Practice the Sacred Heart Devotion by Father John Croiset. Now, you know that the Feast of the Sacred Heart is coming. We will have Easter, the octave of Easter. We will have the Pentecost, and soon enough, Corpus Christi will be upon us, and we want to have this this book digested and notes made, consolidated, and put into little handleable things in your hand so you can read them, laminated, because you're going to be using them for years, okay? That's the point. There's no way to consolidate this book, to practice this book, unless you do these notes, and to put them into practice by reading them over and over so that it becomes habitual, okay? So as you know, I started making my notes, right? And here are the documents. I've already read 1 and 2 and 2. Oh, come on. I've already read 1 and 2. I just did chapter 3. Chapter 3 has a lot of wording. It's not just bullets. It's actually important phrases and paragraphs, all right? Okay, let's do it. Chapter 3. We must become truly humble, excuse me. We must become truly humble and perfectly mortified to acquire perfect love of Jesus Christ. We must become truly humble and perfectly mortified to acquire perfect love of Jesus Christ. Right off the bat, what does it mean to be truly humble? Well, I think one of the ways to be truly humble is to remember that God allows whatever happens to you. And so one of the ways we're not humble is to kick against the cross, complaining about this, complaining about that. Meanwhile, God is there. Think about it. Look at the big picture. Look from heaven. Look down at yourself with your cross. Look down from heaven where God is watching you handle the very tool that he uses to mold you into the saint that he wants you to be. Now, picture him watching you as you get angry when you drop something, get angry when somebody badmouths you, complain about it, I put the one I'm recording on airplane mode so that it wouldn't interrupt my video because I expected calls. Okay. So picture God looking at you. I'm not talking about picture God looking at you, asked to be delivered from the cross. Oh, no. That's all part of it. That's all part of it. People have been delivered from terminal cancer, which is a cross. People have been delivered from horrible situations as they humbly pray to be delivered. I'm talking about those natural reactions in us that compare us to sinners and say, look at him, he's enjoying his life. Look at me, I'm miserable. Those people are all hellbound right now if they don't change. This is the way God is making saints out of us. If you look at the person who has a cross, for example, let's say a person agrees to do something for someone else and gives his word, and then it becomes onerous on the person who made the agreement. And as a result, he just says, I'm not doing this, and walks away from the agreement, leaving the person to whom he made the agreement completely in a mess. He walks away from the cross that his word got him into, and he abandons it. The humble Christian is going to handle that and make good his word and see to it that he gets through this agreement. But the worldling is going to abandon it, go on and enjoy his life as he's mounting up all of these sinful things and failures toward his neighbor. And as he breaches justice over and over again, he's on his way to hell. But that's not the way we are to handle this. So God is looking down on us, watching how we handle the very tools that he uses to mold us, okay? So we must become truly humble and perfectly mortified to acquire perfect love of Jesus Christ. And there are two ways to be truly mortified. Number one is to be mortified exteriorly. B, interiorly. Exterior mortification is bodily austerities, fasting, vigils, hair shirts, the discipline. The discipline is something that is used to inflict a discomfort on your body. Children at Fatima, one of them used a tight rope around her waist. B, interior mortifications. These are more important. This involves the repression of all inordinate affection of the mind and heart. These are more important. It is important to note that the lack of mortification is the source of all the imperfections that are alive in us. It is important to note that the lack of mortification, your lack of fasting, bodily austerities, your lack of vigils, hair shirts, the lack of discipline, the lack of repressing inordinate affections of the mind and heart, these cause your imperfections. How do we become truly humble and perfectly mortified? One is true mortification. Two is sincere humility. Okay? Sincere humility. Without true humility, there is no true piety. The author of this book, believe it or not, says, demand humility from God. He says, demand it. Lord, grant me humility. I need it. We have to convince ourselves of our imperfections by frequent self-examination on ourselves. What did you used to be? What are you now? Is there a difference? What would you be today without the grace of God? We are not surprised when other people fall, because we know how close we ourselves are to fall from the grace of God. Do not speak about yourself. Humility, therefore, is cherish those who hate you. Do not avoid humiliation. Do not take pleasure in vain thoughts and projects about the future. 4. Do not praise yourself. 5. Never complain of your cross. Never wish to be pitied. 6. Do not be troubled about your fall if you should fall. 7. Excuse the faults of your neighbor. 8. Defer in all things to other people. 9. Do not trust yourself in your undertakings. 10. Do not highly esteem your accomplishments. 11. Pray much and speak little. 12. When you are mistreated, a humble person says that the offender is correct, and acts as God acts, and thinks as God and the angels think. 13. Remember that you deserve hell. 14. Be silent when you are hated. 15. Thank God for those who hate you. God allows this. 16. Prefer anonymity over being known. 17. If we do not forget ourselves, there is no peace in our lives. 18. Perfection comes from seeking only the pure glory of God over our own spiritual interests, he says. The result of this mortification and humiliation will be joy and sweetness from this. And that ends chapter 3. And we'll continue on chapter 4. We're getting there. We're getting there. I have my notes. All we got to do is print them out, laminate them, and we will be ready to go. Chapter 4. Chapter 5, Tender Devotion to the Blessed Virgin. That's a short chapter, chapter 6. Very good. Okay, so we're getting there. I'm moving through this appropriately in order that we have this ready by the Feast of the Sacred Heart. All right? So let's do that. Thanks for watching. Stick with this. Don't give this up. This is not just something we say, oh, that was nice. I read that last year. Yeah. No, this is a manual for spiritual exercise. This is something you adopt for the rest of your life. You know, it was the last devotion given by Christ in order to reach out to people. Yesterday on Easter, I was thinking, here God is. He gave us his Son who died for us. And the vast majority of people enjoy the benefits of God and never, not even, forget about an act of thank you, God. That involves at least saying words. There isn't even a thought. This is how bad. See, 600-700 years ago, the world was a place of faith. People had faith. And the church was out converting people. Now we're in the post-Christian era. And we are now in a situation where people who represent themselves to be Catholic, lay people who represent themselves to be Catholic clergy, are a new breed of people. The faith is not something that needs to be believed. Take a look at the Athanasius Creed and compare that to what purports to be the Catholic hierarchy today, and you will see a very significant difference. And so we know what we're heading toward. There were prophecies that said this would happen in the church. And so we have to keep the faith. And the Sacred Heart devotion is exactly for that purpose, that we could actually remain Catholic while the world falls down like dominoes from the faith, from the grace of God, falling into one error after another. Houses that I work in have statues of Buddha. These are people from Christian countries. When I say Christian, I mean Catholic, where Catholicism ruled. People from Europe, they got statues of the Buddha. And this is a form of blasphemy, you know, especially from descendants of Catholicism. You know, it's a real dilemma, but not to worry. God still exists. He's as true today as he always was. And we know where the world is heading. Jesus says, when I return, do you think I will find faith on earth? So we know the answer to that is, yes, Lord, very few people will have the faith. And it's a contagion, right? Faithlessness is a contagion that has to be rooted out. So if you have faithlessness in your family, you can see the effects of a 22-year-old child in the home, the effects of that 22-year-old on your 10-year-old. So if the 22-year-old is faithless and acts in a manner that is the result of the pagan world in which we live, you know that you have to do something about the effects that that has on the younger child, right? Because if you don't do something about it, the 22-year-old will give the younger child the impression that only you believe this stuff. And there's always a desire in all of us to take the easier path in life, to go to bed without saying prayers, to wake up without saying prayers, to not go to church. God is good. He loves all of us, even if there is a God. That mentality is in all of us. There's a pagan inside of all of us that wants to live a soft life and doesn't want to pray, doesn't want to mortify, doesn't want to fast, and doesn't want to obey the 10 Commandments. And so if you permit a godless offspring to infect your other children, for example, the younger children will eventually be converted to godlessness. I saw this personally happen. If you have a faithless spouse, this is a widely known thing. Now, let's go back to the Middle Ages. If you had a faithless spouse, well, all you'd have to do is go out the door and see women dressed very modestly, people talking about God, statues in the public arena. There were other helps to the families hundreds of years ago to the faithless spouse, they were always faithless spouses, always. But today, a faithless spouse is enunciating the spirit of the world, which is waiting for your children as soon as they leave your home. So if you are the parent, the only parent who has the faith, and your child hears the echo of the world inside of the home, and that echo is confirmed as soon as they exit the home, well, your preaching inside of the home will be the only lonely voice those children ever hear. And there is a very good possibility that the child will obey the louder voice, which is the faithless spouse and the world outside of the door where you practice the faith. This is the problem we have today. It's led to a lot of sadness in families, Catholic families. There's a lot of division today in homes today, with people trying to adhere to the tenets of the Catholic faith while they're overwhelmed by the negativity that comes from a faithless or lukewarm spouse. So this is not an easy thing. Saint Rita of Cascia had a very rude husband, but she lived in a Catholic world. The world was overwhelmed. It was a lot easier for her husband Fernando to save his soul because the whole world was speaking Catholicism, and his proud little life succumbed to the pressures of the threats of the Catholic world in which he lived. Hell exists. You're going to die one day. You're going to be judged. That was on his mind. Today, judgment is relegated to one person against another. Do you know he judged me? That's what judgment is. It's something that's hated by people and only relegated to the thoughts and decisions of another human being. Judgment. when you hear judgment out in the world, they're referring to people making conclusions about you based on something small that they've seen of you. There's no judgment of God. And so, obviously, this evil that's inside many of our homes today will win, because the grace of God is very strong, but it's the human will to reject it is very free to choose one or the other. And so the easier life oftentimes wins. And so this is our commitment. We have to practice this. And my suggestion is that each of you who really wants to do the devotion to the Sacred Heart makes this a pamphlet, a little booklet. There's no other way to do it. And that you carry it with you. Make a couple of copies, keeping it in each car. Just in case one gets lost or misplaced, you have it. And you keep it on an email where you can print it out and laminate it again, just in case you don't laminate it and it gets torn and frayed or whatever. You print it out again, and you... This way, at least when you sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament, you become extremely familiar with the contents of each chapter and know what you have to do. There's no other way to do it unless you're in it very often. Very often. Because there are so many facets to it. First Fridays, the Sacred Heart Feast Day, what you do during the morning, what you do each Friday. So it has to be in your hands often. Okay. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.